Oh yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming out to the event tonight. We're going to hear from Will Fellows and Bronson Lemer. But first, I want to welcome you to Majors and Quinn. This is the largest independent bookstore in the Twin Cities. 16 years strong, it's still going. You're sitting in the middle of 300,000 books. You can spend $1 in the corner back there. You can spend $1,000 on some rare books up front. We've got brand new books. We've got books going back to 1750. We do events all the time. Later this week, on Thursday, we're going to do another event for Pride. Ryan Ben Meter is going to be here. He's an essayist, and he's written a book called If I Knew Then What You Knew Now. You Knew Then What I Know Now. Sorry, I was getting that one wrong. Which was just reviewed very nicely in the Star Tribune on Sunday, if you want to look that up. And local author Michelle C.M. Harris is going to be here, reading from her novel Enter Olivia. So that's 7:30 on Thursday. And coming up, July 15th, we're going to have the author and poet Sapphire in the store here. Sapphire wrote the book Push that was made into the movie Precious. And she is back with a new book, which is a sequel to Push, called The Kid, and it is the story of the little boy born towards the end of Push. It's an equally searing novel. It will be a very interesting evening. That's July 15th. And October 27th, I'm really pleased we're going to have Alan Hollinghurst in the store. Alan, yeah, do you know? Alan Hollinghurst is a British novelist. He's really fantastic. He's written 4 books so far, including The Spell and the Swimming Pool Library and The Line of Beauty, which won him the Booker Prize in 2004. He hasn't written a novel since then, but he's back this fall. He's got a new novel called The Stranger's Child. And he's going to be touring the U.S. for only a week. You can't see him in Chicago, you can't see him in Denver, you can't see him in Milwaukee, but you can see him here. It's a really short trip. But he's really good. I hope you'll come out to that one. That's October 27th. You can find all of our information on our website, majorsandquinn.com. You can find it on Facebook, Twitter, but we'd rather you just come in the store and talk to somebody where one of these. That's the best way for all of us. Karen Hodges is going to talk to you for just a minute about Quantified Library, who sponsored the event tonight. So, Karen Hodges.
Quite all right. I'm here with Quatrefoil Library. I'm on the board of directors of the library, and we're here to talk about when Will Fellows was doing research for his gay bar book. He looked around for original copies, and he found it in our library. So we're primarily a lending library in St. Paul, GLBT material, but we do have a strong archive collection of pre-Stonewall artifacts, books, magazines, newspapers, newsletters. So we are open to the public. You can call us. You can find our catalog online. I have some brochures and some business cards if you'd like to find out some more about us. So with that, I'd like to say Will Fellows.
thanking the Quatrefoil Library for their incredible work over the last 25 years as they have gathered and made available for public use, not just storing it away in an archive, so much great material. And also, of course, Majors and Quinn Bookstore for hosting this event and all of you being here this evening. I think it's really a pleasure also for me to be sharing this evening with Bronson Lemer, the author of the book that you'll be hearing about after Gay Bar, The Last Deployment. He's a fellow author published by the University of Wisconsin Press, which has an incredible track record in LGBT publishing over the last 15 or 20 years. And Bronson's autobiography, I think, is maybe about the 25th or so in a series of gay and lesbian autobiography that they have produced. So it's a pleasure to be able to read that, Bronson. He's hiding back in the corner with his bottle of water. So what I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about how this revival edition of Gay Bar came about, and what the original book published in 1957 amounted to and consisted of, and what it represented at the time that it was published, and talk about the woman who wrote it, where her life went, where she came from, and where she went after running this bar, and so on. And then I'd also like to just give you a sense of what the revival edition of Gay Bar is, and what it consists of in addition to the original material. Helen Branson was born in, the author of Gay Bar was born in Nebraska, or actually in Kansas, and moved to Nebraska as a child in 1896. And she was married shortly after the end of World War I to a fellow Nebraska native. She had her first child in about 1920 when they had moved to Idaho and were working a family ranch that was owned by her husband's family. She hated ranch life. She was a very unusual woman, very much a nonconformist, had unconventional views about things, was interested in, certainly for that era, kind of crazy esoteric things like palmistry and astrology and spiritualism and just occult kinds of interests. And so ranch life in Idaho did not suit her very well in the early 1920s. So she loaded up a milk can cart and loaded her 2-year-old daughter and her luggage onto it and pushed it 2 miles to the nearest railroad and took the railroad to Los Angeles, where she had a brother who was working as a camera operator in Hollywood. And that proved to be a very good home for her. Her husband followed her. They ended up divorcing in the 1930s. And so in the 30s and 40s, Helen, in order to try to scrape some income together to maintain a household with her daughter, did palm readings in various nightclubs in Los Angeles, various other odd jobs too. She cooked and so on. She got to know quite a few gay men in the course of her working in these nightclubs, and she found that she enjoyed their company. And she didn't really know at first that they were gay, that they were homosexual men. But when she learned that, she then became intrigued and was interested in seeing if she could discern a consistent pattern in the palms of gay men. And she says in her book that she did. She found some consistent patterns, but she doesn't reveal what they were. So, then she worked as a house mother in a gay rooming house. She managed several gay bars for other owners of bars in Los Angeles in the 40s. And she became rather disgruntled with the way in which these enterprises were managed, because she felt that they weren't very friendly and didn't create a hospitable, safe environment for the men. That they were just kind of, for the most part, opportunistic money operations to make money off of this clientele. So she decided in 1952 that she would open her own bar, and she did on Melrose Avenue in Hollywood. The book then, the book idea came to her in the mid-50s, and it was published in 1957 by a small press in San Francisco, the Pan Graphic Press, which did printing for several of the early homophile organizations like the Mattachine Society and One Incorporated and the Daughters of Bilitis, a lesbian organization. And this was their first book project. They were very proud of it. And in this original edition of the book, Helen describes her impressions of the circumstances of gay men in that era, her impressions of some of their strengths and weaknesses in terms of consistent personality traits and aptitudes and so on. She talks about the kind of double life phenomenon that, of course, was very common then, the necessity in most cases for these men to lead a life that appeared to conform to heterosexual norms. Basically, provides quite an interesting survey of all the ways in which she managed the bar environment against the various hazards that she and her clients faced. She had good relations with the police department, which was really quite an achievement. She needed to really keep an eye out for intruders who might try to take advantage of her boys, as she called them, in terms of perhaps engaging them and then going to the police and suggesting that these men had made sexual advances to them or something like that, and trying to make money off of them, bribing them or blackmailing them. So there were many hazards that were faced by her bar proprietors or patrons, and she was very intent on preventing that from happening. So it's a wonderful window, I think, into that very dark period in American history for homosexual people. And one of the main reasons that it was a dark period was because it was just several years after Kinsey had published his books on male and female sexuality. And in those books, many Americans learned, now if they didn't read the book, they learned it from newspaper magazine coverage of the topic, that there were many homosexual people, many more than you would ever guess, many more than you would pick up on if you were out, out and about in the world. That was a real freak out event in the lives of many American people. And it also then led to a demonization of these kind of unknown, hidden homosexuals who were seen as a real threat to the integrity of American life and the American family. And of course, it was also in a period after World War II when there was a real desire to return to some sort of idealized gender norms, where women should be in the home, get out of the factories, get out of the workforce, get back into the womanly roles, men should be in charge, and the idea that you had a lot of homosexually inclined people was very problematic, of course, in that scenario, and Helen talks about that too. It was also a period of a lot of, from our vantage point today, very crazy speculation, essentially, about the causes of homosexuality. And in the new edition of the book, I list at least a couple of dozen of the purported causes, all the way from intrauterine kinds of things to, of course, effects of rearing and other problems. So the homosexual problem was a big deal in in the time that Helen was writing this book. And the thing that I think is so remarkable about it is that in an era when most of the books on this topic, nonfiction books, had titles like The Problem of Homosexuality, Homosexuality, Disease or Way of Life, Against the Law, They Walk in Shadow, very kind of dark, difficult titles. To have a book come out that said gay bar and had a rather campy, fanciful illustration of a